Dear viewers, dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new interview here on Politik Spezial. I'm reporting today from Lake Constance, and my guest is someone I've wanted to interview for a long time. There are always comments under the articles and under the videos like, "Yes, Mr. Reinhardt," but there are no viruses. I am with someone today, a biologist who specialized in marine biology, who says viruses do not exist. I am looking forward to a conversation with Dr. Stefan Lanka. I am glad, and thank you very much, Dr. Lanka, that we can film you here today. A very warm welcome to Politik Spezial.
Wonderful. Very sincere thanks. And thanks also to Professor Otte, who I greatly appreciate.
Thank you. I've been following you for a long time.
I have always felt that in my back.
Yes, I've been following you for a long time, and as for your theory, I'm not a scientist and I'm just asking questions.
And on this channel, my approach is to let critical voices be heard, because I believe that's what science is all about.
That's how it used to be. Someone made a scientific thesis, left it space, and then it was the task of the other scientists to refute or verify this claim.
And I think that since 2020 and the COVID period, this approach was largely lost. So one talks about the science, and you must follow the science. And everything the German health minister says may never be questioned. The veterinarian, what was his name again? Weiler, was it?
Wieler, Lothar Wieler.
His statement will never be forgotten. You may not question anything. You just have to do it.
And you are now a representative of science who says viruses are not the things we are told they are. Yes, and that's what I want to start with. How's that?
So, I had a conversation with Professor Bagdi. It's going to be published, but it's not online yet. And Bagdi says yes, some viruses have actually not been verified, not proven. For example, hepatitis C and the AIDS virus. What's wrong with that?
Well, the very first task in science, and the job of every scientist, is to try to refute his own thesis. It's a duty of government scientists, and this is in their employment contract. And only if it is not refutable, then may I say I have a scientific fact here. But that's not been happening in science, not only since Corona, but it's not been happening since 1858. Because here science was simply destroyed via a dogma that was put into the world through the back door. It was a coup in science, in the state, because with that fear which was cemented or put there, the justification was established to, so to speak, no longer trust one's own body. This whole foundation of Western high school medicine, that we are made up of cells and the cells make disease poisons, was never correct. And when you look into cell theory itself, or that some disease poison is being produced by a virus, then one realizes there is no scientific evidence, but there's only contradiction. And this is so hard, and I have to warn you right away. You can only tell someone who really wants to hear it. When I tell someone who believes in vaccines or metastasis, that someone, a family member or a friend who had cancer, died of the idea of metastasis, then it is too hard for them to accept this, and it hardens them. They don't start on their own to question anything, and they defend the state doctrine which delivers and enforces the treatment.
Is it really the government, or is it not the pharmaceutical lobby who does that?
No.
So who's in charge? Does the government control the pharma lobby, or does the pharma lobby control the state? I think rather it's the case that the pharma lobby determines what's going on.
No, pharma arose out of this concept. Something else happened. So first there was the concept, and that was then fulfilled with the idea that the body makes a disease out of poisonous pathogens, which must be verified. Then you make an antidote, and that was ultimately the theory of humors, that a disease poison arises and you become healthy when the body makes the antidote. the poison for the disease, the body, and the antibody. And Socrates criticized this, and shortly afterwards in Greece too, the teaching of the humoral theory was over. He was executed for this because he publicized the real medicine, the body-soul biology. He made it public. So he was critical. There are two medical systems. One that we know suppresses symptoms with medications so that the unfree can work faster. The original explanation can be read in Plato.
Okay, I want to be able to follow this now. So we suppress the symptoms, but do not cure the disease so that the unfree can work. The unfree work faster again.
They get back to work faster.
What do you mean by that?
The slaves who are the unfree get back to work faster. Today, they are the employees.
Ah, okay. Okay, now I understand it. So it's basically like when politicians, these ministers, take their oath of office, they say, we have to put the interests of the German people first.
So I have come to the conclusion that politicians have no say at all. They read out whatever is given to them. They are simply talking heads who have no competence of their own and certainly no knowledge, at least in this area. So that's politicians. I became very sure after studying Charles Wright Mills, who wrote the book The Power Elite in 1956. There are very few families, about 3,000 people in the West, who have control over the monetary system. That's very clear. They exercise power over people. And then ultimately it is our monetary system which creates shortages, and lack of something creates aggression, and finally these symptoms appear. I don't like the word disease, because disease is a defect, like being deformed. Symptoms, which I consider to be neutral from a biology perspective, are always a reaction to a mental injury. According to Socrates, every injury to the soul is manifested in the body. And I was in a position to investigate this in 2000, after I had been in a vacuum for over 10 years. I didn't know what these symptoms were, which I should attribute to a virus I was pretty sure did not exist. I myself discovered a structure seen in an organism in seawater and isolated from it. Then it was biochemically decomposed and always yielded the same amount of protein, always the same nucleic acid. And so it started with the so-called viruses. I've researched HIV and AIDS, measles, hepatitis and so on. There's nothing there. But the model forces those involved to think that something must be there, because since 1858, one may only think about symptoms in a material way. It is dogma that there is no spirit, there is no consciousness which has an impact on my body. As Socrates said, with medicine for free people, we heal with the spirit and with the word. It is this medicine that Dr. Hamer rediscovered in 1981 with a technique that can look into the brain, computer tomography, and then he discovered that actually if I find a symptom here on the knee or intestine or liver, then there are always very specific signals in the brain, the advertisements, aha, now one has something, I can estimate how long has a person lived under this sustained shock or is already in recovery, has been healed. I can look back a few years and say the symptom is now 5 years old, 10 years or so it has become chronic, because this person cannot get over the mountain, not mentally or physically.
With viruses, I still need to understand this, and indeed, once in my life I had something quite hard. It was herpes. I was quite young, 14 or 15. I'm not saying now it was freaking me out, but I felt terrible and then had herpes in my mouth. And as you say, the herpes virus, every person has that in them. And then there appears an outbreak, for example, if you hate something. What's going on here? What is herpes? And the flu? And why did I get this disease from the spirit?
Herpes is quite simple. If I have a separation conflict involving the lip, so I'm not being kissed anymore on the lip, or I don't have this closeness to a parent anymore, or someone I know, or to a first girlfriend, or if I want to be separated because I just don't want to have the kiss or the touch. If it happens on the skin, it becomes thin due to this impression. The skin then rebuilds, and depending on where this happens, it is called measles, chickenpox, rubella. On the mucous membranes, above and lower down, I call it herpes, because there the inflammatory response is larger and more visible. This is herpes. The flu, on the other hand, is once again a collection of symptoms.
Wait a minute. With herpes, I mean, it's not bad. I'll just explain what happened. It was that an old woman drank from my glass. I didn't see that, and then drank from that glass. And that was awful to me as a 14-year-old. And then I got these blisters on my upper lip.
Yes, but not immediately after drinking. It must have taken a few days.
No, not a few days. It was pretty quick to appear afterwards. Now that must be due to some cause. Does it have only the spiritual reason that this occurred? Or is there some substance which then somehow combines with the spirit and caused these blisters?
No, there's no substance involved. So I can generate images which, if people even look at during the healing phase, they become disgusted and get the symptoms again. 95% of our symptoms are already in the second phase when this persistent existential situation is over. We call this two-phase. I don't feel the first phase. I have cold hands, cold feet, a compulsive thought. It drives me, and only when it's over, when I know it's over now, so I actually solved it with a better job or a new partner or whatever I know it was, then I would be pleasantly tired, warm, and having a fever. These are always signs of healing. It is two-phase. Yes, doctors knew this before, but since 1858, all this knowledge that was there has been suppressed. 80% of free doctors have been driven into illegality by the law, and because of this concept that everything may only be explained mechanistically. Mechanics. Yes, we are pure mechanical beings. They refused because they knew that spiritual events are not just an accident. So naturally, it can work that they trigger these processes.
We just saw in America a huge scandal due to the advertising of a jeans brand, American Eagle. And it was about the fact that the model was advertised as having great genes, and jeans is the term for pants but sounds the same in English as the word gene. To what extent do a person's genes contribute to disease?
So, if I suppose we are composed of atoms which form into cells, this concept is also wrong. It's been clearly refuted 7 times, yes. Then I had to...
Who refuted it?
Well, Hillman was the most famous. He showed it in the electron microscope through geometric considerations that it is the cell membrane. When I cut a cell through the middle, the cell membrane would have to appear so thick and further up towards the pole a bit thicker and then very thick on the actual pole. But it always has the same thickness. He has shown that there are never receptors on the cells. They've not been seen in any electron microscope image. There's no ion pump that is needed for our energy model to indicate something is going on, that the cell has energy. One sees in a light microscope that the nuclei rotate. So in our model, they hang stably in a cytoskeleton inside, and so on. It has long been known that life always evolves from the outside to the inside as a sphere with 64 nuclei, of which it is said these are cells which are always evolving from the outside to the inside. This is called embryology. The tissue layers, we call them the germlys, from which all organs are formed and not by making 1, 2 mom dads and 4, 8 and so on, are said to develop from the inside out. But that's not been seen yet.
But don't we have a
Fertilized
egg?
No, we have tissue. We have tissue cut from a woman that was surrounded by thousands of sperm, which then later in its mass, in its tissue mass, forms the placenta. The placenta is male. So it's not something which somehow then emerges from the cell division and so on, but it's tissue, it was tissue and is tissue. But in 1858 the idea was introduced that we are made up of atoms and the cells are atoms of life, and they would just always divide and divide and divide, growing larger, and in each cell there is the hereditary substance guiding how everything develops afterwards. But this genetic substance is not stable, it changes in each nucleus, and so quickly that it cannot be a genetic substance.
So you think the genome is constantly changing?
Exactly. Now we need, this is a compulsive logic which is set. So that when I start from cells, I need a genetic substance, a building material as man is made. Here, make a heap of cells, make a right hand, and not a second right hand. It must be a left hand. This does it all. We have a compulsive logic. There must be such a hereditary substance. If consciousness does not shape us, or if spirit does not shape us, if a word cannot kill, if one word cannot heal, then I need pure mechanics. This is like I need a building plan for a house, the functional plan with heating, the air conditioning things and so on, wastewater, and it's not. We have, I used to say, self-organization. And that's it. It is what Socrates knew, that we are simply a soul that has become matter. And in that soul, as I perceive it, a nose has to do with smell, ears with hearing, bones with movement. Then there is the spiritual information which materializes here. I mean that the ear has already fully implanted during pregnancy. This is the shape of an embryo. So that reflects everything here. We have stages of development. They disappear again. We need them for a long time. They show up and so on. And I can't explain that with any genetic blueprint that I'm healing again. Yes, something needs to be removed and then the skin or bones are repaired. Yes. So this model would just be comical if it wasn't so sad.
But you are alone saying this.
No. So I got this from Professor Fritz Pohl in Konstanz. This was not my professor, but he was the great nucleic acid specialist. I knew all about him, yes. In Austria he took the assertion that nucleic acid is an alpha helix and scientifically refuted it experimentally. And when he came to Konstanz, where I studied to get a small professorship, that's where I met him. He built Europe's largest sequencing company, the GATC, in Konstanz. And he also brought me to AIDS. I thought I just found a harmless virus discovered in my algae. Because it was there. There was something in the sea. I could isolate it, photography, biochemical, all identical, control experiments at every level.
That means you have contradicted yourself. You say there are no viruses, but say now that you discovered a virus.
So I thought that it was a harmless virus, until I realized that this is virus attribution and that I can't say that. What I discovered 20 years ago was a minispore. In science, others began following this research I did and discovered there are more of these particles in the ocean. If you calculate the biomass, the sea is like all the trees, fish, algae, people, all put together. It is a giant biomass and it's alive. It has a metabolism which is becoming more complex, increasingly complex. And I was just not allowed to write in my publication that I had discovered a minispore here. I had to write it was a virus. In my doctoral thesis, in the publications, a harmless virus.
Dr. Lanka, you mentioned briefly, if one assumes we are made of atoms, That is how you expressed it. But yes, what are we made of? It is undoubtedly the case that we and everything, the table here, the glass and so on, consists of atoms. Or?
Well, who says that? A few people who are blabbering away say that, but they never checked anything. I mean, just look at Wikipedia. This is relatively unremarkable, and I see here that it is only speculation with strong forces and weak forces, and they can't even explain gravity. It's impossible. I cannot say with atomic theory what keeps us on the ground. So what am I going to do with it? And then I have to look who instigated this in order that we believe it. We have been cut off from this spiritual world.
So who staged it?
The Freemasons.
Weren't they the Jesuits?
I just know who pushed Virchow, who was on the right side of the revolution until 1848. He was heavily in debt and really wanted to be a pastor, but his father forbade it. And then the uncle on the maternal side takes him into the trap of the Freemasons because he was the head of German Freemasonry.
What is the reason? Why did the Freemasons force this, in your opinion?
They needed a new theory to rule. So I'm not saying the Freemasons. I think they are the ground troops of capital or money capital. They call it money. And they wiped out the nobility and the churches, starting with the French Revolution. Nice to read in books. Danton is dead, and so on.
What disturbs me a bit is that you can't really talk about the Freemasons, because there are so many different groups. There are different branches, e.g., the French Freemasons are quite different from the German ones. It's just the same as with different religions.
But if I'm a secret society that doesn't reveal its cards, then I must accept these kinds of blanket insinuations. The fact is, Mr. Hesse took Virchow under his belt. Everyone who was on the barricade in 1848, including Virchow, was interned. Doctors received a professional prohibition forever. However, Virchow was appointed to full professorship at Würzburg, and there he was confronted with the only little book that has survived from the early Christians, and he built his new theory of life. It was clear that we are made of tissue, and the tissue fluid is not water, it is living. And they knew that, and the first thing which he had to do was to massively suppress his fellow student Robert Remak. We owe it to embryology, which has survived to this day, to understand that we come out of tissue. Virchow suppressed that to push the idiotic cell theory as a scientific fact.
But can't you see it under the microscope when a single egg cell is fertilized? How it divides as 2 becomes 4. Can't you do that? I mean, I remember my biology class. I even took a biology performance course, and that's how it was explained at the time.
Yes, but these are artifacts in the optical microscope. I mean, I can't look into the organism. I can only look at different stages of development. And then I always say there are always spheres. One calls this a blastula. It's not a bunch of cells which becomes larger, but the nuclei are outside. 64 of them. Only then does invagination occur. And the first germ leaf, the outer and the inner, come out. And then the other 2 germ leaves are formed. And there was a coup against this. Virchow appeared 10 years later with the exact opposite of what he had published before. The cell is now the unity of life, and all diseases come through disease poisons. And that was wrong at the time. There was also a huge outcry against this. Only 3 doctors, 80% of which until then had not been regulated by law, they were out of it, and military medicine, the 20%, he could only study with them because he was totally poor and in debt. He studied this until 1848 and wanted really scientific human things, which he rightly praised. But then 10 years later, he was completely turned upside down and says, We are made up of cells, not from tissue. Only the cell lives, and all life comes from cell division, and all diseases via pathogens. And pathogens, disease, poisons, and virus is Latin for poison. And this is a compulsive logic. And it hurts me so much when Professor Bhakti, who I so much appreciate for his courage, his public letter to Merkel, his call on the internet, this is absolutely authentic. He gave me strength, and I have respect for him and for Dr. Schiffman and all these people. But they stay in that position, and because he can't now explain rabies, that suddenly an animal gets epilepsy, yes, that's always happening. If I have a motor problem, yes, then this act which influenced me becomes visible in children to defend an abuser. With a soldier, where did the shot come from, which hit his colleagues? In Switzerland, there is Dr. Peter Levine, who offers somatic experiencing. They have the greatest success with trauma therapies because they come to exactly this protective approach for treating epilepsy. Somatic experiencing is experiencing the body, but regulated by an intelligent man in an unthreatening situation. Then I solve it and it's over, and the epilepsy never comes back and they are out of the trauma. This is how body-soul biology works.
Body-soul biology means the following: that my spirit and my state, my inner state, causes the disease, or
the symptoms can say something. They are not something negative like a defect, like a deformity.
so symptoms are triggered and the soul plays the greatest role when I get sick.
Until I become symptomatic. It's just such a big rethink. I need some humility. But what's important in healing is, and you can get this from the Bible, don't look back, Mrs. Lot. Don't bring back the shit that you have seen where you were dethroned. Otherwise you'll be turned into a salt column. So I have to give it up mentally too. And Dr. Hamer found out what all doctors knew before from the great healers, Gasenauer, Franz Anton Mesmer, who was a great shooting star in France until the French Revolution. In Meersburg there was Markdorf. So they knew that illness was a two-phase process. And if people were always hanging out on the symptoms, they called it the crisis. Let me resolve the crisis. They always did that together, sitting beside a water trough on wet rope. And here we are in the form of energy from whence we came, and then one began to tell, and boom, gets his epilepsy and starts screaming, crying. What do I know? The thing is then gone. They were all safe with each other, and then they were healed, and then it didn't come back. And this naturally applies to dogs. So when Bhakti says, in Thailand, I mean, they are eaten there. They are beaten and experienced violence, and when they are healed, they have epilepsy, alias rabies. And back again to where the concept comes from. I mean, Virchow, who established it out of thin air for a new form of government or a new legitimacy, using a new form of pressure, namely not just spiritual, the most violent form which the churches used. Jesus died for our sins, but the original sin and the purgatory that the Pope decides and knocks on the door every 25 years to delight a few souls with a sweeping fire, this is terror, spiritual terror. And this spiritual terror was maintained. You cannot trust your body. Here comes the poison of disease, initiated by an evil other who does not wear the mask and is not vaccinated and so on. Or the metastasis screws from the back into the brain and so on. That's how it works. The same fear of being unable to trust one's own body. This would become a pseudoscientific state doctrine from 1858 onwards. And from that, and not just since Corona, medicine was always dictated, controlled and led by the military. Once I have an emergency, see you at the Federal Press Conference with some scary-looking generals. And it works. Just look at the internet, EES, Epidemiological Intelligence Service. That's the CIA of medicine, and it's at the Pentagon, like the American disease burden.
What exactly is behind it?
Fear. Fear, in order to rule.
Okay, fear. Fear is created. We know that. Fear is constantly generated. But fear of death, whether it's in front of the microbe or in front of the Russian or something, can you say that it is basically done to maintain domination and on the other hand to be able to rule? You need a lot of money for that.
They have the money through uncovered paper money or fiat money. Goethe warned of this and so on. But they rule with fear. And this is it, what Schiller said. The upper ones cease to rule when the bottom layer stops crawling. Why does the lower layer crawl? Because they don't trust their bodies. And it starts with the act of vaccination of babies who are exposed, and a strange person chases them with a long needle and sticks it in their muscle, which after 3 days burns like hell. Or maybe it is stuck in the buttock, which then causes a sexual conflict. If mothers are lucky, their children are not aggressive towards them. This happens very often. The mother is the protector of the baby, of the child. And the child has to undress. And the children who accept this, for them it is normal that they can't trust their own body and of course not their mothers either. Or vice versa. First not the mother and then not their own body. And so it keeps going. I felt very safe as a child here in the neighborhood because there were so many kind people from Transylvania. An elderly gentleman who told me stories, and then a Czech in Friedrichshafen. And then they get their cancer diagnosis, then their chemotherapy, and first the teeth fall out or the hair or vice versa. And I knew that this is wrong, that this can't be. It can't be. And this is how people are dominated, but what can we do about it? And that's the most important thing. Previously, so I said my greatest achievement was not knowing for 10 years until I hit the nail on the head about where the symptoms come from, which get attributed to viruses. And that was my greatest achievement, simply not doing any shit, excuse the expression, just to give some reason, a little hygiene, a little immune system, moon is bad or something, electrosmog or something, but I don't know the reasons, full stop. And my biggest mistake was, I noticed that harshly with Corona, to tell people what I know, my heartfelt things, to those who do not want to know them. I pre-harden them. I meet them because they believe that vaccination is the baptism into the world's largest good-evil sect by which they are ruled. Of course, there's emergency medicine, surgery, which is always needed. That is logical. But all these chronic diseases, infections and so on, this is pure terror, nothing else. The people involved don't know that, but they are not scientists because they never checked the foundations. Then they would see it. Infection attempts in humans have never worked. And with animals, they are so perverse that when I tell them what is done there...
I remember my time. I had measles. I had everything. I had measles, I had mumps, I had rubella, and with measles it was the case that yes, my mother did not have a measles party, but when I got measles, she immediately put my little brother with me so that he got infected. And now you say this infection does not work.
It has never worked.
Yes, but my brother also had measles.
Yes, but then it could have been the same separation conflict that you and your brother had. You could have felt the same, or one after another, separated from your parents through kindergarten, school, or by another sibling, by a pet. This is a separation conflict. The skin has become thin. And when it's over, healed, the picture is fine again. Mom is there, or I come back regularly. Then the skin rebuilds. So things are always two-phase. Does that explain it? Explain why is it usually only on one side?
I have heard about an Antarctic expedition. They were alone in the wild for weeks and then all got the flu. So, then I asked myself, when I read this story, I hope it is true, I can't check it. I asked myself, how can 4 people, isolated from the outside world for weeks, suddenly get ill? Are they suddenly in contact with a virus? Where's it coming from?
This is one of these very good examples which I must seek out. And if I can't explain it, this model is not given.
But on the other hand, to return to my younger brother,
Let's stay with the flu. With the flu, we already have one of the greatest instruments of deception. There are always dozens of symptoms. It is called the flu. If I have one of these and the flu test is positive, or if there is a cluster in the area, it must also be the flu. And that is the greatest deception. The flu actually comes from the ribs, and there is the bone. When my self-esteem is gone, the bone breaks down and I don't notice it. When it builds up, then it hurts totally. Okay? So I also have, of course, when I have mucus from the mucous membranes, where I smell it and then I determined, actually I should have known it, that during a weather shock the mucous membranes decompose. It can go so far that the mucous membranes are bare, where every breath is already putting corrosive pressure on the tissue underneath, and in the healing it swells, then the nose may be closed, the foreheads, and so on and so on. This is already a healing process. So, a typical example.
that just explains it to me. There's something, but I'm not saying it now, it's too personal. Okay, because I just had a pretty bad cold. Okay, yes, this flu, I wanted to get back to my brother. You say with this measles it always results from a separation conflict or something?
No, from the skin.
But it's still interesting. If you have two children, a child has measles, you add another one and the child gets measles. Something has to happen. Then to say, yes, they both have the same conflicts.
The measles parties.
Yes, they both have the same conflict.
No. This example is a bit tricky. But other examples where the mothers, when they hear that a child is sick, they want the parties. Why do so many mothers want the measles parties? Because it has become known or observed that when children stand still in their emotional development, and when they solve that, a high fever often occurs. So these symptoms, and not necessarily something on the skin, and then the development block is cleared. There's never been a measles party through which a child from outside of the family got the measles within the following 3, 4 or 5 weeks. The reason being that I need an ongoing shock activity of 3, 4 weeks, during which the skin degrades to an extent that makes the repair process visible to the eye. One needs to know that. These are the rules of the game.
That's a quite different way of thinking about it.
This is a very different way of thinking.
Yes.
Yes, but that's the old way of thinking. The two-phase nature of symptoms, and that has just been suppressed. And I say that we need this for 2 reasons. When we lose our fear, we are free, and only then, when I trust my body, I am free. If I am not free, I am dependent on the state for cancer prevention, for this and that and the other. If I know the real biology, as I call it, or as Hamer later called it, the Germanic new medicine, I call it real biology, or body-soul biology, the term is neutral. And when I understand what Hamer found out in detail through computer tomography about mental conflicts, not yet presenting on the body or only weakly, it can radically change my entire behavior. And then things come out that normally would never happen. Even healing crises, where the whole thing comes up again, where I want to let go of this image, yes, that feeling. It's so intense that you suddenly become aggressive or want to commit suicide in that moment. And when I'm depressed, this thing turns inward against me. Yes, if I know that, I also understand that criminal law needs to be rewritten.
Why?
Because many crimes were not intentionally planned. They arose spontaneously, where a person who is in a frame of madness, so to speak, suddenly sees these images again. But when I know that, when I know how it works, I no longer judge anyone else. And that is a prerequisite for peace. And I am for peace. And that's why my lectures advertised at the Circle Guru or the other tours which I have are named "Silence is golden, wisdom brings peace." I cannot have peace when 80% of people believe in this thing. It won't work. If they harden, they are against me, and the one who is terrorized always defends the terrorist. We are in a global Stockholm syndrome. How do I get out of there? By radiating peace myself. And it works non-verbally. If someone honestly seeks and finds this and is in great need themselves, then it resonates. We used to call this the morphogenetic field, but of course, I naturally don't like the word genetic. So yes, of course, the information field, then it resonates and suddenly everyone knows. Many discoveries in human history were made like this and spread everywhere without people knowing each other, and suddenly everybody knew.
You mean via the morphogenetic field?
Exactly, the morphogenetic field. And that's how we get peace.
Where does scientific research stand on this?
I hear it so often, and there are enough examples of this. There's an example of monkeys. In Indonesia, on the islands, a population of monkeys began washing potatoes with salt water in the sea, because potatoes with salt taste better. And then suddenly, all around the islands, without any contact, monkeys began to wash these potatoes in salt water.
I mean, it is the same with knowledge. Honestly, the findings which I was able to collect convinced me again that they probably live within people. Perhaps they come from a larger field, but I'm pretty sure from everything that I have gathered together from history, what has happened, when I see new insights, I think that is from these fields of living people, or perhaps already from beings which are no longer material but were once there.
Okay, let's now come to the end with gene therapy. It is often claimed that gene therapy was there to suppress the function of the spinal gland and disconnect us from higher consciousness.
No.
So what's your opinion?
I mean, nucleic acid is not a genetic substance. Nucleic acid is the metabolic resonator and stabilizer, on which the rough template for enzymes which I need are stored. So when I haven't drunk alcohol for half a year, these disappear from my nuclei. 50 rough template to neutralize alcohol and aldehydes in my metabolism. And then I need to train again for half a year to survive the Oktoberfest. Okay? So this happens via RNA, which from our point of view comes out of nothing. In all conceivable variations possible, and there where it can grab a substrate somewhere and react, then it remains in metabolism for longer and can then be stored in DNA form. But that is self-regulation, which I cannot interfere with. And my greatest luck was that I had to read Erwin Chargaff in high school before I went to elite college. My teacher insisted on Erwin Chargaff, and we later became friends. I learned a lot from him. He's a great biochemist. In 1978, he wrote the book Heraclitean Fire, which says that they can never do anything at the nucleus because the complexity there is far too great. And I have seen this, and Hammer has shown that everyone can prove it for themselves. Every part of the body is a materialized unit of consciousness, because this finger here has a completely different self-esteem compared to my shoulder or my pelvis. But if that self-worth is vitally hit, not wounded, but unexpectedly existentially hit, leaving me alone with it, in this situation the shoulders then slump. I don't notice this happening. I noticed the building up because it hurts like hell. And then people say, when they sit together in a ski chalet in Austria, drinking themselves senseless, now we have the flu. They all start having bone pain because they are out of their field. This is why the doctor density is the highest in vacation resorts, when people leave their everyday life behind.
Let's go back to the sea time. What do you think? Why was it done? Just to make money? Just to create fear? What was in that gene therapy?
No. There's nothing in there. The syringe has nanoparticles. Every vaccine needs a poison to cause inflammation. And this inflammation releases proteins in spherical form, we call them globulins, to build new tissue here. So after each injection of poison, no matter what, the globulin constellation goes up, and then they say, oh, these are the antibodies, this is protection. The package insert says that the immune system never protects against disease. So this immune protection, that's why they vaccinate. These are the antibodies. For some time now, these injections contain nanoparticles. They are even more powerful, yes, in their destruction of tissue. And then they tell you these are the transport particles for the mRNA. But mRNA is so sensitive that it's immediately destroyed by the nanoparticles in the syringe itself, immediately. That is why they said at the beginning we would have to store it at minus 80 degrees, because if it's stored at room temperature, it's gone. It's gone in milliseconds. Even if one could actually inject mRNA into the muscles, it would be gone in milliseconds. It can't do anything.
So, was it a placebo?
No.
There are enough who became seriously ill and died.
Wait just a minute. So whoever doesn't die from the nanoparticles within 3 weeks, because they just flow through the veins, forming thrombosis and so on, it was not the vaccine which caused symptoms to appear. This is very important. What then happens are symptoms after many months of existential fear. Overload breaks down the heart muscle. Someone who's been vaccinated 4 times thinks, now I can get out again. Play football, musicians, giving interviews, earn money again. Overload rebuilds the heart muscle. That is heart muscle inflammation. It has nothing to do with what is in the vaccine. Nothing could ever end up in the heart. If I inject something here, it goes into the veins, in the lymph, and it all ends up in the liver. Nothing goes out of the liver into the body. Oh no. That's excluded. It goes into the bile and is gone. There is fear there which cannot be justified. And this is where, very unfortunately, the vaccine critics unwittingly make this fear even greater. They think about the models with viruses and genetic engineering and think this is correct, but they never check that it's all in order. And this unfounded belief doesn't stop working. mRNA, that's why spike proteins are produced everywhere. So this is like BSE, where the virus was a protein.
That was mad cow disease.
Exactly. And then the fear never stops. It was like that with AIDS and with every pandemic which appears. Some critics who realized see partway through it, but not completely.
And what's the consequence?
A criticism which does not hit the core stabilizes the construct, unfortunately. It breaks my heart that such people who took so much risk to appear in public, that they can't continue. But it's like they went so far there and I just keep going. And I think I have hit the point and made the point where possible. Silence is golden. Don't tell people who do not want to hear, who believe in these concepts, I will find Jesus. Günther Schwarz, a 60-year-old theologian, noticed the contradiction and resolved it by translating actual quotes from Jesus. Because he found out that Aramaic cannot be translated into Greek, so he translated the Greek into Aramaic and saw where it was awkward and found the rhyme.
I don't understand that either. Why can't you translate Aramaic into Greek?
The wise words are missing. Okay, yes, they are simply missing.
So, there are words in Aramaic which are not found in Greek.
And German is so brilliant. The English have 3 times as much vocabulary as we do, but we can combine words and constantly bring new ones into use. So that explains the superiority of German technicians, engineers, or anything, because they can express themselves more precisely than all the others. This lies in the structure of the language.
That too now. You just said the English have 3 times as much vocabulary as we do. I think English is much easier to use than our language. We have so many different expressions for so many things. They always have a slightly different nuance.
Yes, we decouple a little more. The Russians do this much more. That makes it more sympathetic. I can communicate more humanely. I mean, I love Brazil, for example. European Portuguese sounds so hard to me. But Brazilian Portuguese is so soft. There are so many African words in it. I find it such a beautiful, soft language. But back to my Jesus, our Jesus. Translated back into Aramaic is a quote from Mark 9. This is something no theologian has ever understood. If you have salt, you have peace among you. No one can understand this. In Aramaic it means, if you have wisdom in your being, you have peace among you. What does that mean? Who can I talk to anyway? And to whom do I say what when I talk? I think that's so funny. And I'm talking about peace. And I think I finished my analysis. After 40 years of searching and making, I have found the essence. Peace comes only through myself. Naturally, through everyone else too. But not from your neighbor. And it comes by radiating it, but not via talk. And above all, not to anyone who believes in a concept. That's why wisdom. So this silence is golden and sounds like a piece of gold.
Wisdom brings peace, Dr. Lanka. These are nice closing words, and that is what we all wish for. Thank you. The conversation was incredibly interesting and intense. Many thanks for that. And if something happens again, like a small global pandemic, of course we could talk again.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I hope, of course, that the intelligent viewers already care about things, and not just when there is a pandemic, because when the flu comes back now in this situation, then we can run, because they have stocks of Tamiflu for 30% of the population. These are the Latvergers, the poisonous plague medicines which Goethe speaks of in Faust I, where he describes how the doctor kills thousands and the survivors applaud him because he gave life to the survivors, because he saved them from the plague. And we have 30% Tamiflu.
Thank you, Dr. Lanka.
Yes, I thank you.
Dear viewers, thank you very much for watching and for your interest. Write in the comments what you think of this conversation. Do viruses really exist or not? To what extent does the mind play a role in health? Subscribe to our Telegram channel. And if you want to support us, please subscribe to our special magazine. You can help us continue our work here. Thank you very much, and see you soon.